You know, it's kind of funny that Marvel is the king of superhero movies as of now and the past decade. But that wasn't always the case. Before the year of 2012, DC reigned supreme as the comic book company with the most successful and beloved comic book films, since pretty much every other Marvel film before Blade was a flop or terrible, and they never really took off until the early 2000s, and then they kind of trailed off until the release of Iron Man. But like I said, before that, DC was the most beloved. And today, I'm going to review some classic DC films. But only the Batman and Superman films, since everything else was insignificant trash, except for maybe that Wes Craven Swamp Thing film. I kind of like that a little. Starting off with Richard Donner's 1978 classic Superman. All I can truly say for this film is that it is a classic in every right, and it really can make you believe that a man can fly. The score is amazing, the special effects are revolutionary for the time, the story is simple and effective, making it a classic. The character of Superman and his dilemmas are timeless, and the characterization for each of these characters is perfect. I give this film a 9.4 out of 10. I think I'm one of the few that actually prefer the second Superman film over the first. I just find it more fun. I like how this film dives deeper into what it means to be Superman and the necessary sacrifices that must be made, and yes, the danger that being a superhero puts on others around you, which is explored in pretty much every superhero, but this film was the first to do it on film. As most know, Richard Donner, the director of this film and its predecessor, was the original Zack Snyder, having to leave the project for specific reasons and being replaced by a different director. In this case, the director of this film's sequel, Superman 3. So the theatrical release of this film has parts from both directors, and that does interfere with the story a little bit, but unlike in the case of Zack Snyder, I think the correspond. This film is pretty much an unwatchable disaster. I don't want to waste my time explaining it. I find little enjoyable about this film. It is best looked at as a really bad episode of the cartoon. I give this a 3.4 out of 10 for being made. Unlike the last disaster on this list, this film I kind of enjoy a little. It is pure Cold War sensations shot straight into a cheap Superman film, and I guess I just like it because it is undeniably stupid and I can enjoy it for that. I give this film a 4 out of 10 for having some entertainment value. Superman 4 is a film that I think gets a little bit of a bad rap. Sure, it's not as good as the first two Reeves movies. It doesn't completely recapture the heart and purity of those movies, but the film is good on its own, at least good enough. I don't think it is atrocious. I don't even think that it's bad. I think it's a nice look back into that Superman world, but a chapter that was intelligently closed after this film. I give this movie a 7.9 out of 10. Now that I've finished reviewing all of the Superman films, now it's on to the Batman films. Oh boy, this is going to be fun. The first Batman film I will be reviewing is Batman 66, also known as Batman the Movie. And this is a film that I'm actually a pretty big fan of. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of it, especially in this latest rewatch, but I think it's a pretty entertaining movie. It's a very fun movie, and it's pretty much the perfect Silver Age Batman adventure. Though the film barely functions as an actual film, having very little character development, stakes, or villain motivations, The film did what it wanted to do, which was entertain you with a fun movie, and that's what it was, and that's what it did. I give this film an 8.0 out of 10. Starting off this Batman retrospect is Batman 89. And this film, I also think, gets a bad rap because after revisiting it, I think I liked it even more than the first time. I mean, the film just has this classic feel to it. This grandiosity, this goal to take you on a stylized adventure in 2 hours, and I believe that it does that. Sure, it might not be the smartest film, it might not be the most original, and all of its plot points and characters may not be completely fleshed out, but the film gets the job done. Even though it is not a Batman movie true to Batman, it is one of the most important Batman movies, if not the most important. And even though I said the film cuts back on these aspects, the story, film, characters, and villains are still not bad, not even close. They are still fleshed out enough for the film and are defined by the end, becoming memorable and staples in pop culture due to this movie. But even though many overlook it, Batman still has a nice character arc and journey, which pretty much saves the film for most people and myself. Everything about this film just spits quality, at least for the time, and now it could just be looked at as an entertaining thrill ride. I think the film does a lot right, and even though it does have flaws and can be dated at times, the film was revolutionary for the time and deserves to be held on a higher pedestal because, well, it's pretty great. I give this film an 8.9 out of 10. The next film on this roster that I will be reviewing is Batman Returns. And Batman Returns is a film that I think is heavily overrated. Many people freaking love this movie, and I don't understand why. The first time I watched it, it seemed off-putting and like a major quality drop from the original Batman film. Many people praise it for its themes, set design, and most of all, the villains. Even though I think the villains were the greatest weakness of this film because they were focused on way too much. And that pretty much robbed me of an entertaining Batman story since Batman was essentially a side character in his own film. Though the themes are nice, though Batman does have character development, and the villains are fleshed out characters, in a world that becomes increasingly more fleshed out, stylized, and entertaining in this film, I don't think it holds a candle to the original. And I think that what it focuses on most, its villains, are its fault. So it sacrifices so many other elements that could have made it great to focus on Catwoman and Penguin. Overall, I give this film an 8.6 out of 10. Like many films, Batman Forever is one that I've gone on a journey with. I never hated this movie or thought it was terrible, but on first watch, 4 years ago, I did not think it was very good. And as it turned out, most of the world, most of the audiences, and most of the critics agreed. But yet, I never hated or loathed this film as much as many others. I don't think it was as good as the 2 previous Burton films or even the Adam West film. But I thought that there was something there. Something that was good about this film. Something that should be appreciated. Recently, there's been a barrage of YouTubers who have said that this movie is better than you remember. Others even saying that it is a misunderstood masterpiece. However, I was not swayed by these opinions, nor did I agree with many of these, but I appreciated what they had to say and kept it in mind. And after a recent rewatch of Batman Forever, I believe that it is better than you remember. First, it must be said that this was not the film director Joel Schumacher wanted to make. He wanted to make a much darker film, a much more intimate film, and bits and pieces of that are sprinkled through the film, and partially, he did make that deeper darker film, as shown in the deleted scenes. This film was originally meant to be around 3 hours. It was meant to adapt the Batman story year one, at least somewhat. But the studio did not want that. So Joel Schumacher was submissive and made this film, which I still do not think is a disaster after this rewatch, but is definitely inferior to what it could have been. With that said, I at least respected the film for that. The first thing I'd like to mention as a positive about this film is the score. The score is amazing and can even rival Danny Elfman's original score. Also, there is character development and strong themes here, and even villain motivation, slight at least. And it also acts as a modern-day tribute to the Bright Knight, aka the Adam West Batman. The film also has respectable set and production design that is surprisingly eye-catching. This film also has significantly better choreography than the prior two films, and is a guilty pleasure of mine because I do find it entertaining and think it does a good job. Whether it's the outlandish story, the over-the-top performances, or the just eye candy of production design. But what I believe to be the best part of this film is its themes and how transparent it is with them. Even though this film is stylized and that style can scare a few off from the film, it works in its favor with the themes of the film, even though the themes seemed half-baked because of the cut material and the meddling of the studio. It does ask an insightful question about Bruce Wayne. The film asks the question, what makes Bruce Wayne better than the villains that he fights against? And represented by his mirror opposite, Edward Nygma, it's his selflessness and his emotional resilience, his drive to not let his emotions, his selfish emotions, his impulses take control over him, and want to serve something greater than himself is what makes him a hero. And that's something worth noticing. I never thought I would do this, but after a rewatch and an in-depth analysis, I give this film an 8.0 out of 10. And now we come to everybody's favorite, Batman and Robin. This film is not as bad and worse than I was expecting it to be. That said, this doesn't really make sense. I'm not going to try to explain it. And though this film may be bad, it is at least somewhat entertaining. It feels more like a straight-to-DVD cartoon movie than a Batman movie, which is what it was going for. I don't think it is as bad as others say. It's still a story, and it has a few half-baked elements that, if were done better, could have made an at least mediocre film. But since those elements were half-baked or not there, that would make this film actually good. It just comes out as how it is. But I do believe the film was best looked at as a throwback to a different era of Batman, into a more lighthearted era of Batman that was just heroes versus villains, like a modern interpretation of the 1960s Batman. Okay, I'm done defending this movie. I give it a 4.5 out of 10. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Leave now.